Hey, so let's talk about our ICANN statement of explaining religious diversity and ethnic diversity in the early Middle East. So we're going to start out with the southern portion of Mesopotamia having the Sumerian civilization. We see separate city-states. We see a shared, largely, religious belief system, and we see shared language. And then all around that area, we have nomadic groups that are migrating into Mesopotamia and are going to settle. And sometimes I call those satellite civilizations because they're going to adopt the cultural practices to some extent of the people near them. And then we're going to see cultural blending with the culture of those nomadic groups as they settle, or those smaller village groups as they become more urbanized civilizations. And largely they're picking up that language. So the next one we'll talk about in that region is the Akkadians, that have control of Mesopotamia by 2200 BC. They adopt the Sumerian writing system, but the Akkadians speak a Semitic language. We don't actually know what the Sumerian language sounded like, but we can translate it because of that language in writing moving into the Akkadian civilization. And the Akkadians were an expansionist empire under a ruler named Sargon, not something we necessarily need for this class, but their expansion led to a pretty quick collapse. Now, how did they rule? They tried to bust down city walls and rule with an iron fist over an extremely diverse population across Mesopotamia. It wasn't effective. Also, there was a lack of internal infrastructure. Think about how difficult it would have been to move from place to place and how important that becomes in terms of creating the interconnectivity necessary to rule a large empire. Spoiler alert, we'll see that later in the Persians with their construction of a roadway across their empire. We'll see that in the United States with the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, or we can see it with highway systems. We can see it with travel in the movement towards globalization in the second half of the 20th century. Interconnectivity is essential in order to have cultures be able to cooperate and to have government of a large-scale empire. Maybe in 7th grade you learned about the roadways built by the Roman Empire. All these things are effective in terms of management. So infrastructure from our wall there is incredibly important. Okay, so what do we see? We see nomadic groups moving into the region. We see them bringing their own religious practices. We see a huge number of polytheistic religions. Now, a lot of students in class have explained the origin of polytheism based on explanations for environmental factors that have occurred in a region, leading to an assumption that it's controlled by gods, and the unpredictable nature of it leading perhaps to the development of many gods. Also, interactions amongst cultures. Maybe they're easier when you have polytheistic religions, when you can say, oh, we have a god like that, or, ooh, we could add that guy to our pantheon. And all of a sudden you see these religions operating near each other. So we're going to see a ton of different polytheistic faiths emerging in that area. But the other one we have to consider is ethical monotheism emerging with Judaism in Israel, okay, in our farther nearly Mediterranean coast region of Western Asia. So with the emergence of Judaism, we get another type of religion that can be in this area. And we'll talk about that one down the road, especially as we move into studying the Persians. Okay? Dating back to probably 3000, 4000 BC. There was some pottery found a few years ago that potentially had Proto-Hebrew markings on it that could have traced back the origins of the religion even earlier. So it's really important for us to note there's religious diversity, there's tremendous ethnic diversity, and that poses some challenges in terms of creating a large-scale unified empire in the region. It also creates differences in identity and how folks view themselves in reference to larger-scaled empires that will be in the area. We're going to watch that, and we're going to see how the Persians handle it from 600 BC onward. We're going to see how that's handled after the Hellenistic synthesis and the invasions of the Greeks right around 300 BC. And then we're going to watch that change with the emergence of Islam right around 600 CE. So that should help us out, and hopefully we can understand that this tremendous amount of diversity is a key part of our starting point at the beginning of our story in the Middle East.